Synagogue attack. The man accused of carrying out a mass shooting in Pittsburgh appears in court. And the military's border mission is no longer just the National Guard. The Trump administration plans to send thousands of active duty soldiers to the southern border.
To renew the California dream, we need to renew our promise to our children.
We don't have to accept their vision anymore, where people have to choose between buying gas to get to work or groceries to feed their family.
The California dream and the race for governor. We take a closer look at the promises made by the two candidates.
I think a lot of people don't understand that for farmers, it's more than just a job. It's actually a lifestyle, and it's really how we identify ourselves.
And a choice that comes down to how Oceanside will grow, what Measure Y means for new development in North County. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. The man accused of killing 11 people at a synagogue in Pittsburgh over the weekend made his first court appearance. Robert Bowers faced a judge while sitting in a wheelchair. He was injured in a shootout with police in which 4 officers were wounded. Memorials for the victims are on display outside of the synagogue. President Trump plans to visit Pittsburgh tomorrow. At the White House today, there were heated moments when reporters asked about the president's attempts to unite the country and his use of divisive rhetoric.
In the next breath, after he calls for unity, he does talk about division in what you describe as drawing contrast. Is he incapable of, in the words of some, toning it down and toning down the rhetoric?
Again, I think the president has had a number of moments of bringing the country together. Once again, I'll remind you that the very first thing the president did was condemn the attacker, and the very first thing the media did was blame the president. You guys have a huge responsibility to play in the divisive nature of this country when 90% of the coverage of everything this president does is negative, despite the fact that the country is doing extremely well, despite the fact that the president is delivering on exactly what he said he was going to do if elected. And he got elected by an overwhelming majority of 63 million Americans who came out and supported him and wanted to see his policies enacted. He's delivered on that. He's delivered on the promises he's made. And if anything, I think it is sad and divisive the way that every single thing that comes out of the media, 90% of what comes out of the media's mouths is negative about this president.
Here in San Diego, the local Jewish community is showing its support for those in Pittsburgh with a vigil tonight in University City. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar spoke with the rabbi who's organizing the event.
Ebony, as you can imagine, it's been a difficult weekend for members of the Jewish community across the country. Reverend Michael Burke is the senior rabbi of the Beth Israel congregation of San Diego. He says members of his congregation were both angry and scared when they heard the news of what happened in Pittsburgh. They're planning a vigil tonight that they're calling Standing Against Hate. They'll have speakers and remember and honor the lives of the 11 people who were killed.
We want to give each other hope and really show what has kept the Jews going throughout the ages, which is our resiliency. We pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off and keep on going.
The vigil is tonight at 7 p.m. in University City. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
PBS News Hour will have continuing coverage on the synagogue attack. You can watch tonight at 7 here on KPBS. The military's border mission is expanding, and it's all because of the group of asylum seekers traveling north from Central America. This morning, President Trump described the caravan as an invasion and warned the military will be waiting. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh has details on the plan to deploy thousands of active duty troops.
Last week, the Pentagon said 800 troops were headed to the border. Today, the Pentagon announced that number would be far higher. Up to 5,200 active duty troops will be called up as part of Operation Faithful Patriot. This is on top of 2,100 National Guard troops who are already called up in April, which includes roughly 400 California Guard troops who are already on the ground. We don't have all the details, but these new troops are expected to be on the ground by the end of the week, including here in California. We don't know where they're staging, but one possible location, Camp Pendleton, referred questions to Washington. Secretary of Defense James Mattis signed the order on Friday. These new troops are mainly soldiers from the Army. Like the National Guard, they will perform support roles. They will not have arrest powers, and they are not supposed to have direct contact with migrants. This latest deployment is in response to the Trump administration ahead of the arrival of a migrant caravan. Guard was called up in April to respond to another caravan. Only a few hundred people from that caravan ended up arriving at the border. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
The election is 8 days away, and in Oceanside, one of the big questions is about development. Should it be more difficult to turn farmland into new housing? KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John tells us about Measure Y.
On the northern edge of San Diego County, next to the rugged hills of Camp Pendleton, lies Morrow Hills.
Morrow Hills is about 3,400 acres, and over the hill it goes down, it extends to the San Luis Rey River. It's prime agricultural land.
Dennis Martinek lives in Morrow Hills and launched the campaign that gathered 13,000 signatures for the SOAR initiative. That's short for Save Open Space and Agricultural Resources. It's Measure Y on the ballot.
Measure Y would protect that. It would protect the agriculture and, of course, the open space. There's only about 12% of the agricultural land left in Oceanside. So what Measure Y would do is require the City Council to get voter approval before turning over any open space land or agricultural land over for development of higher densities.
Small agri-tourism businesses are beginning to spring up in Morrow Hills, like this winery and tasting room. Landowners are moving away from citrus and avocado and experimenting with crops like coffee and grapes, which use less water.
Measure Y is to preserve agricultural land in Oceanside, but ironically, the San Diego Farm Bureau opposes it.
We've been farming in Oceanside for about 80 years, and our family has worked very hard. During the war, we lost everything. We came back to Oceanside and worked to create what we have today, but it hasn't been without struggles.
Neil Nagata is president of the San Diego Farm Bureau and the third generation to work this land in Morrow Hills.
Now we have competition from Mexico. There's a lot of regulations in California. We have high labor costs, and the cost of water is astronomical, as you would know. But and then just one more thing on top of it, this measure that was brought out by a neighbor is threatening our livelihood.
Nagata says putting restrictions on how his land can be used will lower its value as collateral for bank loans that he and other commercial farmers rely on every year before the harvest comes in.
We borrow money against the value of the land, and so if the land value is less because of these restrictive measures, make it difficult to borrow money.
But Martinek accuses commercial farmers like Nagata of being in league with big developers who are planning future housing tracts and funding the opposition to Measure Y.
We see that the development community is interested in that. The particular developer of North River Farms has contributed over $500,000 to oppose Measure Y because they see opportunities of building housing, and that's where the profits are.
Nagata says selling his land to developers is the last thing he wants to do.
I think a lot of people don't understand that for farmers, it's more than just a job. It's actually a lifestyle, and it's really how we identify ourselves. And if we lose that, if we actually had to sell, it is a negative thing. It isn't something that we want to do.
Eric Bruvold of the San Diego North Economic Development Council says if Measure Y passes, it will freeze the current zoning, which allows new houses on 2.5-acre lots.
But if you reduce the value of the land and you make it difficult for farmers to finance, much more likely it's going to stand fallow, or it's going to be developed in 2-acre estates that sell for $2 million each.
Bruvold says Measure Y will only make it more difficult for Oceanside to keep up with its housing goals.
Oceanside's only at about 20% of its mandated housing needs that it was supposed to build over the last cycle. So it's already behind the 8 ball.
He says passing Measure Y will make house prices go up faster in Oceanside. Not so, says Diane Nygaard, a community activist who supports the SOAR initiative. She says Oceanside has plenty of space to build new housing in town.
Our adopted housing plan for Oceanside, we've got plans for 6,200 housing units on land that's zoned residential.
Nygaard says the City Council has already approved housing on land that was supposed to remain public open space, like here on El Corazon in the heart of Oceanside.
Why do we think it's at risk? Because it's at risk. We see it happening before our eyes.
Nygaard says 3 votes on the City Council has changed the zoning on this piece of open space, and it could do so in Morrow Hills. She wants voters to have the final say on whether more housing can be built on Oceanside's last remaining green spaces.
Maybe they'll never be threatened, but if they are, we will have a voice. We will be able to say, okay, you've got a good project, put it on the ballot and let the people decide. Then we can weigh the benefits to the community.
Voters face a difficult choice. If they vote no on Measure Y, it opens the door to denser housing development encroaching on Morrow Hills. If they vote yes, it could help small farmers but threaten the livelihood of the remaining commercial farmers and result in more land being sold for million-dollar mansions on the outskirts of town. Alison St. John, KPBS News.
Proponents of Prop 6, the measure to repeal the gas tax increase, are threatening to recall California's Attorney General. Supporters are going after Javier Becerra because they say the description his office came up with for Prop 6 is misleading and that it doesn't clearly indicate it will repeal the gas tax.
These politicians have stolen our gas tax money, and now they're trying to steal our yes vote on Prop 6 and turn it into a no vote. And for that, there must be a punishment that is extracted.
A spokesperson for Becerra called the move a publicity stunt.
6,500 projects will go away as a result of this initiative, and that's something that voters need to know. And what Carl DeMaio is doing is trying to talk about anything except for what's actually on the ballot in November.
Opponents of Prop 6 say the official description will have little sway on voters. Some voters have already cast ballots, but many are still deciding. And to help you stay informed, KPBS has created an online voter guide. KPBS reporter Claire Tragesser explains how it works.
The KPBS voter guide, officially called Voters Edge California, is customized according to where you live. When you type in your address or zip code, it will show you the candidates and propositions on your individual ballot. Go to kpbs.org/vote and enter your address. Then click on the November ballot guide. There you can see more information about each candidate. For example, let's look at the county supervisor's race. You can see the candidates, their experience, top 3 priorities, and who supports the candidate. You can also see candidates' answers to questions we pose to them. If some information is blank, that's because the candidate chose not to participate. The guide also has information about state and local ballot measures and where you go to vote. To access the voter guide, just head to our website at kpbs.org/vote. Claire Tragesser, KPBS News.
The candidates for governor have talked with KPBS about the California dream and how to fix the things that define it. As part of our statewide collaboration, KPBS reporter Amita Sharma takes a closer look at the promises from John Cox and Gavin Newsom.
Behind this pitch from Gavin Newsom.
To renew the California dream, we need to renew our promise to our children.
And this ad from John Cox.
We don't have to accept their vision anymore, where people have to choose between buying gas to get to work or groceries to feed their family.
Is the acknowledgement that the California dream is in trouble.
It was the California dream of being able to rise from the bottom and make it your way to the top. And, you know, I would say that now that dream is almost gone for a lot of people.
I think the dream is about the ability to imagine one day replacing generationally the aspirations of your family and your parents. The fact is, from one generation to the next generation, there's a hope and expectation of social mobility. And the reality is the American dream and increasingly the California dream is a lie for too many people.
More than a half of the state's renters and more than a third of its homeowners are spending big chunks of their paychecks on housing, and almost half of working Californians grapple with poverty. Newsom's fix.
Our goal is to get 3.5 million housing units over the next decade or so, plus or minus. That hasn't been done since the 50s.
Cox blames red tape and the high cost of construction.
California has the worst business climate in the country, the highest taxes, streamline the regulations, end the frivolous litigation and lawsuits, shorten the approval process.
Less regulation, says Cox, will also make it cheaper to live here.
The reason that people are living in poverty is because the cost of living. A dozen eggs is $4 in San Diego. It's $2 in Phoenix.
Newsom, on the other hand, thinks the government needs to do more, especially when it comes to the state's 19% poverty rate. That includes 2 million children.
And child poverty is the ultimate manifestation of our failure. Well, homelessness and child poverty, I would argue, with twin manifestations that are the ultimate expression of our failure. As Americans, not just Californians.
He wants to see more investment in prenatal care, Head Start, and after-school programs. Both men also think more should be done to revive California's middle class. Newsom says he will push for
economic development plans in 14 regions in the state. We call it regions rising together. Each economic region is unique and distinctive from one another. And our goal is this, that the vision for economic growth cannot be realized from Sacramento, and that vision can't be sent down. It's a bottom-up vision that will be realized at the local level.
Cox says you've got to cut.
I want to cut the regulations and streamline the situation so that more businesses can be here, but we also have to make the state affordable.
Thad Kauser is a political science professor at UC San Diego.
The California Dream is working great in La Jolla, it's working great in Santa Monica, it's working great in Palo Alto, but it's not working for Central California, which is still struggling with high unemployment. It's not working in El Centro, it's not working in most parts of San Diego.
He says Newsom's prescription for reviving the California Dream is consistent with how the state has been governed for decades.
It is essentially, we're going to have a government that's bigger. It's going to spend more, but it's going to give you more. It's going to provide more in things like the University of California. That's going to be an engine of social mobility. Those sorts of investments that we've seen in transportation and education throughout California's history have been part of what's built this state.
He says John Cox's vision.
What John Cox is proposing is something that we've seen at some points in California, but it's really more the kind of the Texas and the Florida strategy. Let's grow and make this an affordable state by trimming government, by making it efficient, and that will lead to jobs, and that private sector growth will spur the California that John Cox wants.
Both candidates think the California Dream can be saved. Here's Newsom.
We have more scientists, more researchers, more engineers, more Nobel laureates, more patents emanating, more startups emanating out of California than any other place on the globe. California's best days will not be behind it. They'll absolutely be in front of it.
And Cox.
I'm going to be that change agent because I know what it's like to struggle. I started at the bottom. I had a struggle, so I know what it's like, and I want to make sure that other people don't have to struggle.
The two share visions of the dream, but have different paths to get there. Amitha Sharma, KPBS News.
Amitha Sharma interviewed both candidates in recent weeks. You can watch the full interviews and more of her reporting for the California Dream Project at kpbs.org.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, hate turns to horror. We report from Pittsburgh, where 11 people were tragically slain at a synagogue. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
A stable weather pattern is expected this week, although the wind might pick up in some communities tomorrow. Aaron Calandra has details in tonight's forecast.
Happy Monday. I hope you were able to enjoy your weekend. Today, we did have a lot of fog and clouds in the morning time, breaking up for plenty of sunshine, though, by the afternoon. That's going to be the pattern for the next day or so, but then we will see some changes. So right now, the Santa Ana winds are starting to kick up in Los Angeles. That's because there's a high pressure system off to the north and east, not quite reaching San Diego, though. We could see maybe some breezy conditions at times, but all in all, things are looking pretty quiet. Oceanside tonight at 54. You'll notice those clouds and fog building overnight. Chula Vista at 58. Once you get into the interior areas, Ramona in those upper 40s, and in Mount Laguna at 48 degrees for tonight. In the metro, 61 for the low. You'll notice those patchy low clouds, maybe a touch of fog, and that's going to break up again for afternoon sunshine. Tuesday could be a bit breezy. Again, Santa Ana's are starting to kick up, but the interior areas, it's going to be a lot cooler. We have a big dip in the jet stream, not going to impact us. In fact, we're going to get a bit warmer as the week goes on. So Oceanside tomorrow, lots of sunshine at 72, Chula Vista as well, and in El Cajon, 80 degrees, lots of sunshine in Borrego Springs, reaching 88 for the high. Here's the look for midweek. Nationally, it's going to be another wet one across Texas into the Ohio Valley, but on the West Coast, at least to the south, it's looking nice and dry. Here we are for the coast the next 5 days. Temperatures will peak on Wednesday at 79, stay in the upper 70s for much of the week with plenty of sun. Inland will be in those 80s. By Friday, we're up to 86 degrees, and it's going to stay beautiful for trick-or-treat night for those kiddos. In the mountains, we're in the 60s. By Saturday, a bit warmer, up to 67 degrees, and again, sunny pretty much every day. And in the deserts, we're going to be in the 80s, close to 90 for the weekend, and it's going to stay nice and sunny all week long. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Back to you.
The first part of fall has been dry so far in California, and that trend might continue. UCLA climate scientists say it's not unusual for rain to be scarce in October, but dry conditions are increasingly being pushed deeper into autumn. This could make fire season worse. Climate scientists say the developing El Nino in the Pacific is expected to be modest this winter. This means winter here may be warmer than average, no matter how much rain falls. San Diego's effort to fight climate change has hit a snag when it comes to reducing carbon emissions. A city report shows greenhouse gas emissions were flat in 2017. That's the second straight year without a decrease. The flat line is mostly due to increased natural gas burning by homes and businesses. Last week, Mayor Faulkner announced he would support a city-run energy program to help achieve 100% renewable energy by 2035. Today, Mayor Faulkner was in Pacific Beach praising the work the city has done to repair roads. The mayor says city workers have repaired 1,000 miles of city streets since 2015, 2 years ahead of his promised schedule. But he says they're not done.
Today, we are proud to announce that this street right here marks the 1,000th mile that we have repaired.
The city used to repair 25 miles of road per year, but has managed to increase that to 25 miles per month. The mayor credits the progress to the Infrastructure Committee, which tripled funding for roads and tightened regulations. He also says there's more work to be done in South and East San Diego. The city is currently on track to fix half of the city's roadways by 2020. Caring for the growing number of people in psychiatric crisis will be the topic of a conference in San Diego tomorrow. KPBS health reporter Susan Murphy tells us city and county leaders will gather to discuss problems and solutions.
Leaders will present a comprehensive assessment of psychiatric care throughout the county, from a bed inventory to crisis response resources to follow-up care. The meeting was prompted in part from the suspension of Tri-City Medical Center's mental health units in the North County. Alfredo Aguirre is director of the county's behavioral health services.
But we really want to emphasize it's not about just adding more beds or adding more long-term care beds, but how do we strengthen that continuum so people who don't necessarily need to be in a hospital are cared for and then referred to the appropriate resources.
Another core theme will be homelessness and keeping people from a revolving door into emergency rooms or the county jail. 3 key panels will feature public safety officials, health and hospital workers, and housing and social services experts. The public meeting is set to start at 9 tomorrow morning at the County Administration Building near downtown. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
The city of Del Mar might formally opposed an educational cannabis seminar planned to be held at the fairgrounds. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has more.
The Good Life Seminar Series is a health event celebrating alternative medicine, which includes cannabis. Organizers say, though, no sales of cannabis products or on-site use would be permitted at the proposed event. Now, this is consistent with cannabis regulations adopted by the Del Mar Fairgrounds Board earlier this year. Still, Del Mar Council member Terry Sinat is requesting the council approve a letter opposing the Good Life Seminar Series. His letter says the city of Del Mar prohibits commercially related cannabis businesses, and even though cannabis is not being sold, the event would be, quote, promoting cannabis products and services, not just education. The letter also points to Assembly Bill 2020. The bill says that events engaging in commercial cannabis activity need a state license, but that license, quote, shall only be issued in local jurisdictions that authorize such events. Now, it's unclear if this educational event would qualify as commercial cannabis activity, and the council is voting to send the letter tonight. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Now here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, Proposition 1 will take a closer look at a $4 billion plan to address California's housing crisis with a focus on veterans. And on Midday Edition, Seeking Asylum in the U.S., a man from Central America tells his story about overcoming barriers while navigating the process. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.